This is Jonathan Lane from Fan Film Factor, and today I am here with Alec Peters and Paul Jenkins. And if you don't know who those guys are, have you been living under a virtual rock? Alec is the executive producer of Axanar. He also plays Garth of Izar, Fleet Captain Garth, I should say. Not Lord Garth, that happens like 25 years later. And Paul is, well, he's the man who is credited with saving Marvel Comics from bankruptcy in the 1990s. He created the Marvel Knights series. He did Wolverine Origin. He's done Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He's done video games. He's written novels, comic books. I mean, you name the comic character, he's written that comic character. And for our purposes today, Paul is also the director of Axanar and also the co-writer of the script. So, gentlemen, I've interviewed you both separately in the past. Now I have you together. Welcome back to Fan Film Factor.
Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
All right, guys. Well, a lot is happening in the world of Axanar, obviously. You just released a trailer a week ago, and you're in the process of, if you haven't already, released version 2.0 of the trailer for Axanar, and you've kicked off a brand new campaign to raise the $30,000 that you need for the fourth and final shoot. Is that correct? It's going to be the final shoot?
It will be the final shoot that we need for producing what we want, but there will be other Axanar things happening.
Like what?
Well, we have a shoot for all the donors, which we're going to do, as we discussed at Starfleet Academy, and maybe other Southern California locations for Star Trek. So we need to do that, and that'll produce like a little vignette for the donors. But basically, to produce Axanar, yes, we've got one more shoot. It's probably 2 days. It's probably going to be in L.A., and then we should have everything we need to go.
So this is not going to be your final crowdfunding campaign, then? You've got one more after this, then?
Well, no, because we've got another crowdfunding campaign for post-production and then another one for the VFX. So, yeah, there will be two more after this one.
All right. Batten down the hatches, folks. You are going to be asked for money again and again. So what is the logistics on you talking about your crowdfunder? I know that your settlement with CBS and Paramount says you can't use a public crowdfunding service like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, so you're going private on that. But are you allowed to talk about the crowdfunder in this interview?
I mean, I can tell you what we're doing, but I'm not going to be directing people to our website or anything like that. Just trying to maintain the spirit of what we've agreed to. So basically, we're only supposed to really be promoting it directly on our email campaign, and we have about 20,000 people on our email list. So we do it that way mostly.
Okay, and of course, I never signed an agreement with CBS, so I will put the URL onto this webpage, so that if you wanted to go to Ares Digital, folks, and give a little money to Axanar to see this thing finished, you can do that. So right now you're trying to raise $30,000, and you can talk about why it is that you need $30,000 for this shoot. So, you're just filming for one weekend in Los Angeles. How does that get up to $30,000?
Well, geez, you have to fly people in. You have to pay for equipment, lighting. You need a grip truck, which is all the lighting, electrical equipment. You need prosthetics, makeup, because this is entirely a prosthetic shoot. We got at least two Andorians, two Vulcans, a Klingon. We need costuming. We need, there's all sorts of things you need. And we spent $50,000 over 2 days in Atlanta on that shoot. This time we're flying across the country and we're spending, 60% of that. So I think that's pretty effective. When we shot the Vulcan scene, we spent about $15,000. So, that was 1 day. This is 2 days. We're spending 30. So we're right on track for what we spend.
Now, let me ask a potentially dumb question here, but you've got a studio in Atlanta. You're in Atlanta. Paul's in Atlanta. A lot of your team's in Atlanta. Why not shoot in Atlanta and fly everybody to Los Angeles?
Well, this shoot is all prosthetic makeup. So all the makeup artists, all the fabricators of the makeup, the hair, all those people are in L.A. The actors are in L.A. that we're using for this shoot. So it's really a matter of simply the vast majority of what we need for this 2-day shoot is in Los Angeles, not in Atlanta. So much easier for me and Paul and Scott to fly in than it is to fly, dozens of people out to Atlanta.
I think one thing maybe to add to that would be if as our producer, Scott, looks at the financing, if there's a better way, if it's a more constructive shoot in Atlanta and cheaper and all that, if it's easier and better to do it, we would do that, right? It's probably not based on the various things like the excellence in the way the prosthetic makeup is made in Los Angeles, the people there, the actors who are in that environment anywhere. It probably is not, but it's possible. It would take a little bit of further understanding, directly to see if it could happen in Atlanta. And if it were the most effective way, then that's what we would do, because we try to do the most effective and cost-saving things, Yeah,
it sounds like one way or the other you're flying a whole bunch of people across the country. And my guess is your team from Atlanta probably can stay in much cheaper hotels than, your talent.
Well, it's really a numbers thing. It's what it is. There's 4 of us in Atlanta that need to be on the shoot. There's a dozen or 2 dozen in L.A. that need to be on the shoot. So it's a numbers game, and it's not really hard to figure out.
Yeah, so, it makes good sense to, and you guys are, controlling your costs. I know a lot of people think that, $30,000 sounds extravagant, but, I want to say that, my 2-day shoot for Interlude was $20,000, and we were, doing everything as cheaply as possible without the prosthetics. $30,000 does not seem unusual or excessive to me. And, hopefully you will raise it, which brings up the next question with the incidental music of Dum Dum Dum, coronavirus. So you mentioned in a recent podcast on Axonar Confidential that you may need to delay the LA shoot because of the pandemic. You might not be able to premiere it at San Diego Comic-Con because there might not be a San Diego Comic-Con. So what exactly is going on as far as the pandemic? How's that going to affect Axonar?
Well, I had a conversation a week ago. I think one thing I will say is that because I spend so much time watching news and paying attention to current events, when I'm working downstairs fulfilling orders, I've always got the news on. So I think I've been a lot more aware of where we're going with this whole coronavirus than a lot of other people. And I know a week ago I had a conversation with our producer, Scott Conley, and I said, this is going to be a big impact on Axonar. And he's like, oh, no, it's not. It will be fine. It's like, okay, we'll wait and see. And here we are a week later, and I think it's pretty obvious that, we were talking about moving our shoot from, end of April, beginning of May, maybe a little later in May. We're not going to shoot until June or July at this rate, because the country is going to be shut down now. March is gone. April, May, June, this country is shut down. There's nothing going to happen for 90 days in this country. So to think that we're going to be shooting in May would be a mistake. And also, remember, we're just shooting a Star Trek fan film. There's nothing really urgent about what we're doing. There's a lot bigger problems in this country than when are we going to shoot our Star Trek fan film. So we're at the mercy of, really people's lives. I mean, people are being affected. I'm not even talking about their health. I mean, the real thing that's affecting people in this country right now is the economic impact. So I think we have to, view what we're doing in the proper perspective, and it's that we're making a film. God bless it. We'll do it when we can raise money and when we can get the people. But and I am probably, I would say I'm 75% that San Diego Comic-Con is going to get canceled this year, or I don't even think it can get postponed, but it'll certainly be canceled. And I'm hoping Dragon Con is not canceled, and that's Labor Day weekend. So I'm probably pretty optimistic that by that time we're back to normal. So the question is, when can we shoot Axonar? Can we shoot it in June? Is it going to be July? How much time do we then need for post-production? But I don't think any of these things are really critical because, what's important is everyone taking care of themselves and staying healthy and not just staying healthy, but because we're socially distancing ourselves and hunkering down in our homes, staying healthy, mentally healthy, physically healthy, bigger problems in this world that we have than Axonar. So I think that what we're trying to do is make the best out of this experience, and that means what can we do as far as live streaming and supporting fans and keeping their spirits high and everyone staying positive. I think that's the value that Axonar can really bring over the next 3, 4, 5 months is that we have this wonderful live stream platform we've been doing. How can we use it to make people feel good about themselves, to keep people's spirits up? I think those are valuable things that we can contribute, and then we'll get Axonar done. I mean, we've been on a great critical path And we just had another great shoot yesterday that Paul was happy with, which is great. And, that's kind of like my take on how Axanar, I think coronavirus affects Axanar. How can Axanar affect coronavirus?
Well, that actually provides a perfect segue into the next portion of the interview, which will allow Paul to talk a little bit more, which is you guys just had your third shoot on the weekend of March 14th and 15th, I believe. I think it was Sunday was the Axanar stuff, and Saturday was something else we'll talk about in a little bit. But tell us about that shoot. How did things go?
From my perspective, as a director, I could not have been happier with how it went. It wasn't a very challenging shoot for Axanar in one sense, obviously, because we know, in terms of its production, it wasn't too challenging. We know how to be set up. We know what we're doing. We've recently had an experience doing a number of these interviews. So really, setting up for one character wasn't the massive challenge. We obviously want to do it right. So we got the right crew, we got the right lighting, we got ourselves set. We know what we're putting together. The challenge was always going to be in the work that Alec and I had to do in terms of actor and director. The fact that in the end there's 10 pages of content for Alec to put down, and it's quite a long session, or a couple of long sessions. There's a lot of material to do. And perhaps, the concern, I don't really want to speak for Alec. I suppose, Alec, you can correct me in a second if I do this wrong, but it is fair to say that there's a little trepidation, perhaps even on the actor's part, Alec in this case, that's a lot of material and there's a lot of expectations and all kinds of extraneous things. Alec runs Aries Studios, so he's got to make sure the studio's right, and there's all these other things running around the production that Alec is usually involved with. But what I had said to him at the beginning was, I need you to act for me, please. I need us to be Garth and the interviewer. So let's make sure that we can try to connect to it. And we have all the best intentions in the world, right, Alec? And then here comes a last-minute hiccup with, say, the trailer. And, oh, no, everyone's head's on fire for a second. And I needed to be sure that we could get past that. And then what happened was that we got onto set, and we had a particular technique that we were working on that we had been talking through. Alec and I have always had our discussions about who Garth is and what makes him tick and what's important to him. We hit upon one specific thing that I've always kind of held to, which is to Garth, his crew is the most important thing in his life. And then once we got going, we got into a very natural conversation between the interviewer and the subject. And at that point, we flew. We didn't have a single line that wasn't delivered the way that I wanted it to be delivered. Everything was done the way that I need it to be, which is very natural. And if we would break, if at times it felt acted, which is the big thing that I wanted to avoid, I would sort of reset us and we would go back, we'd chat again for a little bit, we'd get back to a natural conversation, and we'd allow Alec to work his way back into it. And we found little techniques between the two of us, which I think always speaks to the trust between the director and the actor, and I think that trust came through in the performance. That's my take on it. I think we got exactly what I hoped we would have gotten, and it was a little easier to get it than I suspected it might be, so it was great.
Well, how about you, Alec? How are you satisfied with your performance and with Paul's directing? How was this weekend for you?
It actually went great. I mean, my greatest, ironically, my greatest concern was I didn't know the lines well enough, because the better you know the lines, then you don't have to worry about, oh, did I remember that right, or I forgot. So, and then the night before, on Saturday night, I had about half the script where I was really comfortable with it. And the second half of the script, I was like, I'm not exactly comfortable with it. And but I was like, oh, but it's Saturday night. I've got 3 hours. I'm going to just lock myself in the room. And then Saturday night, we're working on the trailer all night. So I show up and I told Paul, okay, first half of the script I'm really good with. Second half, and he's like, don't worry. And because of the way Paul works, especially in this situation where he would start a conversation and he would ask me questions, and that works really well, especially for me, because I know the character so well and I know Star Trek so well, so I can start riffing on other stuff and then just work the answer to the question right into the conversation, so it comes out very conversational. And No, there were one or two times where I was like, okay, that wasn't it, and I knew Paul was going to ask me to do it again, and so that's being self-aware of are you in the moment or are you not? But Paul's very easy to work with, and he gets, my concern was, did Paul get what he wants? That's my concern, because he knows what he wants. He's the director. It's not what I want. It's what he wants, and as long as he's happy, I'm happy.
So there's something I want to add to that, which is actually almost funny, like nerd alert funny, is that, with other actors, we would try this technique, and it would work. It's quite effective. The technique in question being that we would say to them, look, I want to talk to you about other things. Put yourself in the moment. If you're an engineer aboard Starbase 7, let's chat about that. Tell me what it was like when you went to Starfleet Academy, and some actors loved it. Some actors had to research Star Trek in order to do it because they weren't as familiar. So you had different ways that the actors worked. And with Alec, I could ask him all kinds of weirdo questions. I could literally say, how do you think the Vulcans feel about, the Andorans or something? And he would know. And so he would just riff on that for a minute. It didn't really matter what I asked him in the context of Star Trek. And that was actually really useful and valuable to the way that the project was put together, because instead of having to dredge something up, I could just kind of chat with him about all kinds of things. And we lived in that world for the 3 to 4 hours that we had to record the stuff. We lived in that world. Every so often, Alec would be hit with the lines to some extent. And Alec, maybe you can comment on this. What I encourage you to do was not to say the lines, but to say what's being said in the lines. So it's not a matter of hitting every note. It's a matter of saying what is generally being suggested. And the only agreement that we had is, obviously, you can't miss the technical stuff. So you can't say proton torpedoes and get away with it. You better say, you better understand what the language is. Other than that, say what's kind of implied. You don't have to say every line the way it's written.
Yeah, and that's really helpful, because it's important to understand what it is you need to convey emotionally and really the content. I'm not worried about exactly the right words. And a couple times I knew I missed the right word, and Paul was like, oh, no, that was great. And, so it makes my life a lot easier, because a lot of times the words on the page are very precious to the writer or the director. And that wasn't the case with Paul. So that makes the actor's job a lot easier. Like, I'm more concerned was about, hey, am I in the moment? Am I feeling this? Am I conveying, what Paul needs me to convey? Not, did I say this word instead of this word? It really allows me to focus on what Paul ultimately really wants. So it's a great process.
How many pages of script, of dialogue, did you have to memorize?
Yeah, I know the answer exactly, actually, because ultimately, if you just gave Alec his sides, it's about 7 to 7.5 pages. With the questions that I added in for the interviewer that lead into the answers, it was almost exactly 10.5 pages. So for Alec's purposes, literally 7.5 pages of dialogue, which is quite a lot.
So 7.5 pages of dialogue is like 7 to 10 minutes of just memorizing nonstop stuff. And I know that, theater actors do that all the time. They memorize entire 2-hour plays. But that does sound like a lot to get in. So for you, Alec, as you're sitting with the script and you're trying to learn all these lines, what exactly are you doing to help yourself memorize them? What is your process, I guess they call it in the industry?
Fortunately, I had two amazing acting coaches in Los Angeles. The first was Howard Fine, who's probably one of the top 3 acting coaches in L.A. And, he's Chris Pine's acting coach, ironically, Bradley Cooper, a lot of top people. After that, I worked a lot with Ted Brunetti, who was a big fan of Axanar, who was a big Star Trek fan, who's awesome. He's been on Broadway for the last couple of years. And Ted taught a class, and he taught an audition class, which I took, and he taught a couple other classes, which I took. And Ted really taught us how to break down a script, to learn it quickly. And a lot of it is also, one of the little tricks is a lot of times the line before you, whoever's delivering a line that you're reacting to, there's a key, there's something there that's in your line as well. So it's like, how do you feel? Well, I feel great. So, you kind of make those connections. So Ted would always have us go through and just read the script once, then go back and look at the lines and circle a couple words that are important. But the important thing is, it's not memorizing lines that's the most important. The thing is really understanding where do you need to be? What are the emotions that you're playing off of here? Because you never want to be, oh, well, this line I'm mad, so I need to act mad here. That's not what you're doing. What you're doing is understanding what is the relationship between this person and this person. And when this line, you have to say this line, you're reacting to what they said, and what does that create in you? What's the emotional context that creates in you that allows that line to be a natural response? So it's a lot different. So going through the script, I'm not trying to memorize the lines, but if the interviewer asks me a question about, what happened here, or how did you feel about this? It's incumbent upon me to understand how would Garth have felt about what the interviewer is asking about, and then, I've never fought in a space battle, so what in my life would be analog to what Garth was feeling at that point that I can tap into. So once you have that emotional underpinning for what everything is, and again, this is where Paul's technique and conversational technique helps a great deal, because you're just having a conversation and two people are talking about stuff. Then you can learn the line, and you learn the line a lot easier and a lot quicker and effective when it has a foundation inside of you. So, it's not like, okay, I'm going to break this line up into 5 pieces, and I'm going to learn the first piece and then the second piece, and then that's memorizing text. That's not learning lines.
Yeah, it goes back to that whole thing of just let's chat. It was a huge part of how we've done these interviews. We've spoken before about it, that I was a different type of interviewer for each different character, actually, just to get the performance that we needed. So if you take a couple of our other examples, we have a character who is in the world of subterfuge and spying, and that character, I said, my interviewer is going to be a very annoying reporter from a British tabloid who is going to ask you the questions that they know they're not supposed to ask, and they're going to ask them repeatedly, and it's mildly annoying, but you can't show it, right? That was the relationship we had in that session. Whereas when we took the character of Leonov, who's a very friendly Russian guy, and we were beginning to work it out, we said, hey, man, we've been drinking together. We kind of share a love of good vodka, and you know me, I know you. Let's have a chat. And it came across, it allowed me to bring out the performances that we wanted. In the particular case of Alec, and I should say Garth, right, what I did was suggest that I am the only interviewer that you really are willing to speak to about a lot of this stuff, someone that you trust and you've spoken to many times. And we developed that relationship, and then we chatted. But it was still that interviewer-subject kind of relationship, and I think it played out perfectly.
Now, I don't know if folks are aware, but I actually sneaked in a few interlude scenes this past weekend. I needed the interview footage with what I like to call older Garth, the one from 10 years after the 4 Years' War. And so these guys were going to be doing the shoot anyway. I figured, well, if we just convince Josh and Victoria to drive the 11 hours from Arkansas each way, they can be part of the shoot. And we can sneak in some interlude footage, which we did, and we got a couple of those shots. So how was that? Was that just like, part of the dialogue for you, Alec, of just, more of the same? Or did you feel like you had to go to a different place for the stuff where you're talking about Jakande than the other stuff that you're doing for Axanar?
No, it was actually just we did it first, so it was a good warm-up. Paul and I got to start there, and it was a good warm-up for what we were doing. I don't think it was very different from what we wound up doing after. It was a different setup, so I wasn't in the captain's chair. But other than that, it was pretty much the same.
And I got some good feedback, by the way. Ray Myers, who's one of both my donors to Interlude and your donors to Axanar, was there. And I don't know if you know that he was on the phone with me, but during one of the breaks, he came out. I guess it was just after you had wrapped the Interlude stuff. And he said, I wasn't actually on the bridge for it, so I was just listening from outside. But, there was some stuff where, Alec was talking about, his friendship with Jakande. He said, I just got chills listening to that. And I haven't seen your performance yet, at least as we're having this conversation. But if you were able to give Ray chills, I want to just, thank you for that, because that'll just make Interlude better.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I think, the wonderful thing also of what we were doing is, I think our fans are very forgiving also. I think they're, it's really great because we can put out things like the trailer. We put out the trailer, which we'll talk about, where I don't think we were all like 100% this is our best. But then you show the fans and they're like, this is the greatest trailer in history. And so I think our fans they're wonderful, and they always buoy our spirits, and so I'm incredibly grateful.
And speaking of trailers, by the way, are there going to be more trailers after this? You said these things may get delayed for a few months anyway, because I think, this trailer was great, wham, bam, lots of quick cuts and everything, but I want to see more meat. I want to see more dialogue. I want to see, what people are actually saying as part of the story. So do we get one of those?
Paul, you want to take your shot at it, and I'll take a shot at it?
Yeah, well, I know that when you talk about trailers per se, I mean, I think there's a few things that would be really cool to put out. Right now, I'm not the marketing person. My job is to make sure that we do the creative stuff. And I suppose in the framework of this, I would say some of the things that I think that are on the creative end that I think are really valuable for the fans and so on to see. So, number one, when you're watching Starship battles, you don't care about the fight unless you care about the people in the fight. And so I'd love to be able to show some of our people some of the stuff we recorded, give everybody a sense that, this is very similar to the original Prelude to Axanar, but obviously it has its own thing. So I think that it would be great for us to be able to put out some of this material. We did a little bit of a small teaser just to show a little bit of Leonos' character. And I think just the general build of the idea that people are going to get to meet these characters would be pretty useful. We have loads and loads and loads of improv material and additional questions that are not specifically set in the script. So I think that we have the material available. Secondly, I personally think that there is a value to putting out more trailers. It'd be wonderful to show it and see it, just to really get the excitement. And there's all kinds of material that we can use to make those. And so I'm all for it. And then the last thing I would say is there's a little bit of an amendment to this current trailer anyway. We've looked at taking it and just amending it a little bit to tweak it up a little bit. So there's already going to be a different version of the current trailer. Plenty of stuff to come.
And Alec?
Yeah, and listen, I love trailers. We're definitely going to have version 2.0 of the current trailer, and then we'll see what else we can. We did stuff in December that might work as part of a trailer. I'd love to continue to release stuff while we're working on getting Axanar there. The thing, when we did Prelude, we didn't do trailers per se. We really did almost previews. Because it was mostly interview, we didn't have the 4 Years War type footage that we had this time. So what we were doing was simply cutting the interview footage together to make a shorter narrative that still told the story. And it was very effective because usually we ended with, Tony Todd's character saying, "I do not fear the Klingon Empire," which was, a big, yeah, go for it, exciting moment. So this time we're doing things a little different, like more traditional trailers. And I like it. The fans love it. And the fans, of course, always want more. So we'll try and give them more.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I want more. Just, if you're starting to take votes. Because I haven't seen any of the other footage. I know people think, I have an inside track and all this. But no, I saw the trailer. It was the first time I ever saw it was when it went live. So, yeah, show me more. I love the Leonov, improv stuff. That was fantastic. So, show me more of that. So let me ask Paul a question as the director, although I suppose Alec as executive producer would be able to answer as well. From 0% being you haven't started filming yet to 100% it's released on the Internet, how far along is Axanar at this point, the two sequels?
I would say it's probably somewhere around 65 to 70%. The last shoot, which is the LA shoot that we're talking about, the last materials, isn't, again, in terms of its complexity, it's not massively complex. It's just, I suppose the complexity is in the prosthetic makeup and the actors and all of the usual production stuff, but it's not like we're having to reset over here and go to different locations. We're going to be in one place, that's good, right? So I would say that that's a 5%. You need to do the VFX, you need to do the editing and sound design, all the other parts, right? So editing and sound design, as anyone will tell you, I've heard this said many times, I've said it myself, when somebody goes to accept the Best Picture Oscar, a lot of us wonder why it's not the editor that goes to get it, it's the producers instead. It's the editors, right? The editing of this project is huge, and so we have to kind of put it all together, get the pieces to edit, and then do the sound design, the music, and all that stuff, the scoring. The other part is some visual effects that need to be done. There's some in the can, there's some previs, and then there's stuff that hasn't been done yet, which needs to be designed. So if you add all of those things up, editing, visual effects, and the last shoot, I would say there's 25 to 35% that's not yet done, but a substantial amount of it is done. That's about a guess.
And as executive producer, Alec, would you agree you're about 65 to 70% of the way through?
Yeah, we've got one more shoot to do, and then we've got, post-production is significant. That's a significant amount of work. I'll feel a lot better once this second shoot's done, because then once that's in the can, then everything else is literally post-production. It's VFX, it's editing, it's everything that we have 100% totally under our control. So getting through the 2-day prosthetic shoot, that's a big deal. Once that's in the can, the pressure is going to go way down.
I know exactly what you're saying, because the shoot we just did this past weekend for Interlude was our last live footage. I mean, the last pieces of our puzzle were grabbed, at least as far as the visual goes. We still have like 4 VFX shots, maybe 5 for Interlude that need to be done. Then we have to get the voiceover for John Gill. But basically, once we have that, the puzzle pieces are all there, and all we have to do is just assemble the puzzle, which, of course, people think, oh, well, you just edit over the weekend and you use, iMovie or whatever. You put this there as master and everything. No, it's a lot more work than that to really get everything edited perfectly. And Paul is right. The editor can make or break a movie. Now, let me ask a question. So for post-production, Rob Burnett, of all people, told me that there are 2 types of directors. There is the director that basically sits with the editor for days and days and days at a time, not sleeping, and pretty much rides that horse completely into the sunset. And then there are directors that basically just sort of let the editor do whatever they want. They stop in every couple of weeks to say, how's it looking? And then they go off and do their thing again. So which kind of director are you?
Well, there are 3, actually, Rob. There's those 2 and the one in the middle. People are on different versions of that, and I suppose I would be the guy in the middle of those 2 things, right? Let me sort of make it clear, the way that I work with everybody, from the DP to especially the actors to the editor to everyone else, is a collaborative environment. So I care very much that they're able to put the piece of themselves that they've trained to do. And, Rob Burnett is an editor. We have any number of editors that I've worked with and people involved in Axanar. And those editors will be encouraged to put the materials down the way that they see, right? But I'm going to care very much about the selects, for example, the takes that we select. I'm going to want to make sure that we live in the right space, and there'll be some suggestions of the selects from me, because that's what we do even on set. We'll be shooting and I'll go, that's a good one, right? And our script supervisor will make a note for me. And then we hope that it was as good as we thought it was later, and we got some various options, but maybe the editor sees something different, something cool. So, I would be a guy that would really want to encourage our editor to put the piece of themselves, his or herself, into what it is that we put together, but with some guidance and some understanding that I know what I want. And then at the end, I do think that there's a valuable moment where the director comes in with the editor and sits down and says, well, I'd like to look at this. And that's not even just down to anybody's ego or anything like that. It's valuable. You want another set of eyes. You want someone with eyes and ears on this. So if you're an editor and you've been doing it by yourself for a while, you really kind of want the director to come in and sit with you and give their feedback now and say, well, how about this, how about that? And if it's a great collaborative environment, then the 2 of you should come up with something wonderful.
Yeah, I really think that there's no director that's just going to leave his movie to an editor.
Other than Christian Gossett.
Well, that's laziness, to be honest with you. First of all, a director has got to choose who selects. That is just one of the basics of directing, because you've gotten your performance, and it's, as Paul said, you're either talking to your script supervisor saying that take, that take, or you then, once everything, you've got the dailies and everything, you go and sit through and look at every single daily and see which is the one you want. I don't think any good director leaves that entirely up to the editor, because they don't have, they don't have maybe the same artistic eye, and they don't know what you were trying to achieve. So I think that's really something that a director has got to do. Now, whether you sit in the edit bay the entire time and watch every single thing the editor does, yeah, you can follow along the spectrum there. But there's a basic level of work that a director does in choosing what he wants the editor to then put together. And then, there's certainly a level of trust of how the editor crafts that story, how things flow from one to another. Those are all things that our editors are really good at and can create a compelling story from. The way Prelude was scripted is not necessarily the way it finally read. I mean, we often thought that Ramirez's speech was going to be the end of Prelude. I do not fear the Klingon Emperor, like in Prelude, was going to be where we ended him, and that didn't work. And Rob was the one that made those corrections. And so Rob was able to say, it's going to flow better this way. And he was right. He was absolutely right. Yeah, I think there's lots of ways for editors and directors to work together, but there's a certain amount of work you expect from a director who's really dedicated to his craft and wants to see the best product possible. Because you see, Leslie, when you're on stage and you see something, you know when you've got gold, and you want to make sure that gold gets into the film.
Absolutely. All right. So the last topic I want to mention as we come towards the end of our interview is your Saturday shoot was not Axanar. It was not Interlude. It was Warped. And I would like you guys, I guess particularly Paul, to explain what the heck that means.
Meta Studios, my company, we had worked on Axanar, and we had a real blast doing it. We shot a bunch of stuff in August and September. Alec, was it August or September? I'm losing my mind. When did we shoot?
October. We shot
October,
in October.
Well, I was having quite a time at the time personally. But yeah, we shot in October, and we went through probably 4 to 5 days. I think, especially the last day of shooting was extremely tiring for me personally. We'd had a couple of things that we needed to overcome, and by the way, the production was great. It went really, really well, but I hadn't had a lot of sleep. And, we were going through the day. We got our last stuff recorded. We felt great. We had a really successful production. So near the end of the day, I said to Scott Conley, throw me one of those shirts. We're going to do a fun moment. Scott throws me a shirt. I sit myself up as basically the worst employee on the ship, right? Like the guy that's stupid from South London. The idea that a South Londoner could make it into space in the future is pretty funny. And so we did it, and we did this funny thing, and we realized, of all the things we shot in the weekend, that was one of the best. It was great. We loved it. We kind of edited it together, and it was very funny. And I said, look, this beautiful bridge sits there. We asked Alec, would it be okay? It's there. A lot of school kids coming on that bridge. A lot of people get a chance to shoot on that bridge, and it's a wonderful set, a wonderful environment. And Alec is very kind to allow us to have a go on the set. And, hopefully it's because we're working very, very hard on Axanar. And so the idea, the premise of Warped, it's a comedy. It's what if the worst ship in the galaxy was on literally the edge of the galaxy, and it was run by a South Londoner, and nobody was paying attention to it. So it just has the worst captain with the worst crew, and one very officious alien called Groknar that we made up. We got in an improv crew, basically, and that is fun. They have the scripts ready for them, but we're going to improv a bunch of stuff. We're going to have the crew with these little vignette moments. We have a surprise appearance by a special guest star. Alex, should we tell him? We put Alec in there. It was great. We had the Admiral visit, and, the captain has been bragging that he was part of Axanar, and then the Admiral visits, and it becomes clear that he wasn't. He was just a janitor. And so we had a ton of fun. It was manic. It was fun. It was really cool. I've had a chance to look at it. The characters are all very different. We have a particular character who's the pilot, basically the helmsman or whatever you would call it. He was amazing. He's like a homeless guy. That's what he looks like on camera. So we had a bunch of fun. And, for a lot of actors and for a lot of people, this was a good thing. We're all stressed out and everybody's worried, especially in the acting and film community. All the productions have closed down here in Georgia. So for just one day, we had a chance to have a blast. I've had a chance to look at the footage already, and it is genuinely funny. So we're going to put together Warped, which is a series of little 2-minute vignettes, and if it plays like The Office and Star Trek kind of mixed together. It's The Office in space. And it's fun.
Now let me ask, it takes place in the Axanar universe, or, is Axanar just sort of mentioned, but it's kind of in an alternate reality?
Yeah, we sort of mentioned Axanar. I mean, I think it's a spoof, understand, right? So we're not really trying to say this is canon, and we're saying, hey, this is fun, right? We had a guest appearance by the Admiral and all that, but it was more, look, what if, right? What if a South Londoner ran a ship? It would be a mess. And it is a complete mess. So we did that. It was the joke is, in the future, people may not be any different. You might actually get a mess running a ship, and if God help the Federation, if so,
Now, I need to ask a very important question, because I don't know who's going to be listening to this interview, but am I going to get a whole bunch of nasty comments from people from South London telling me to just, bugger off?
Oh, you kidding me? No, absolutely. No, you're going to get a bunch of people from South London going, yes, about time we got our day in the sun. I mean, for one thing that I thought was really funny is I'm a big, in the Premier League, I'm a big Crystal Palace fan. So we literally had a moment where all the crew are dressed in old Palace gear and they're kicking a football around the bridge, which, by the way, was very safe. It was a little super light soccer ball that wouldn't hurt anything. But they're literally playing soccer and watching the game and just hanging out and messing around. So every South Londoner would be like, all right, those are my guys.
Now, you're not from South London. You're from Wales, right?
Well, my family originally from Wales. I grew up in the West Country, but I do have family in South London, so that's why, hence, being a Crystal Palace fan. So I'm from all over, mate.
Okay. Well, I just want to double check, make sure I got my accents right there.
No.
By the way, folks, it's kind of funny when you know a Brit like Paul, and you try to tell people what he told you, because I've had a lot of conversations with Paul now, and I try to, repeat what he said, and I can't repeat anything you say without actually doing the accent and using the word mate every so often. I mean, I just, I can't quote you without trying to sound like you, failing miserably. But, I just, as long as I put mate at the end of every sentence, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
So anyway, when are we going to potentially see those 2-minute vignettes?
Yeah, so we'll put those out really quite quickly, actually. Those would be a different kind of thing. We want to put them out on our social media. Meta Studios, my company, we have a new YouTube channel because we really hadn't done it before. We were busy in production, but we love the idea. I've always been a fan, personally. I love to interact with the fans. So we have the Meta Studios YouTube channel. We've been putting a lot of content out recently, and this will go out largely on that content. It will go out as 2-minute little stories on Facebook and Instagram and all of our social media feeds. And at some point, we'll cobble together sort of a half an hour, because it very much does play. You come back to interviews with the crew, and they're just talking about what they do. We do have a wonderful alien called Groknar, and he's very officious. And we actually have a second alien. And the joke behind it is that we couldn't afford the prosthetics for actually making up 2 aliens. So we have a shape changer who's stuck in the form of a brick, and his name is Commander Brick, and he basically does tactical. So we just put a brick on a chair, and he acts in the thing.
Brilliant.
And my 2 kids, by the way, are obsessed with Lieutenant Commander Brick. They think he's brilliant, and so I got 2 of them. And once we finished filming, I gave them each a brick, and I was like, "There's Brick and his stunt double," and they're like, "This is great. I've got the real Brick. You got the stunt double."
That's kind of cool. Or, maybe you can have the second Brick, appear and it's his twin brother or something, or maybe it's the...
Yeah, we might do that. Yeah, we might do that. Or we might just sell them as action figures.
The thing practically writes itself, Paul. It's wonderful. It's brilliant, as you Brits say.
Well, it is, and it's fun, and so we'll show that really soon. And again, we had so much fun being on the bridge. We really appreciate Aries Studios letting us shoot over there. It's a blast, We're grateful to Alex for letting us be there and being in it. And we had another guest appearance as well, so we won't spoil everything, but we'll start showing it really soon. Thanks.
I can't wait. All right. Any other Axonar news that you'd like to share before we sign off?
Well, I just encourage everyone to watch our live streams on the Axonar Live YouTube channel. We'll probably be launching one on the main Axonar channel as well. But the important thing is to subscribe to our YouTube channels. Make sure you're subscribed and getting the Axonar newsletter on a regular basis, because we've got about 20,000 people on our mailing list, and you should be on it if you're listening to this. So go to the Axonar.com homepage, look up top, it says Axonar newsletter, and you can sign up for our newsletter if you are not getting it already. And that's really the best way to stay in touch with everything that's happening on Axonar.
And you do a good job of keeping people updated, so my congratulations to you. And yes, if you've listened through, all 50 minutes of this interview at this point, and you're not subscribed, something is wrong with you, so subscribe, for goodness sake. And anyway, so also I will remind you, since Alec can't, that donations are not only welcome but needed. And I realize that, yes, the economy is a little fakakta right now and uncertain, but, even if you just give $10, or $20 or $25, whatever. The other day I gave $45. It was all I could afford. But,
Yeah, I think you gave 46, right? Weren't you trying to round it up? There's someone had given a weird number.
Well, somebody gave a weird number. You were at something $4.67 or whatever. No, there was $3.67. I think, okay, well, I'll give $46.33 and just even it out. It really bothered me. I don't know. It's a little OCD on my part, but anyway, but whatever you've got, drops of water turn the mill, my friends. We get $30,000, and they're off to film with the great prosthetics, and those are going to be the Gary Graham scenes coming back as Soval, and you want to see Gary Graham as Soval. So anyway, folks, that's where we are right now. I'm sure there will be more Axonar news coming up. Alec and Paul, thank you for your time today.
All right, thanks for having us on, man.
Well, good luck, and keep yourselves safe and healthy, all right?
All right.
Take care.
Okay.